Imagine a world of privilege, expectation, and opportunity. A world where the corridors of power and wealth shape the lives of children from the moment they are born. This was the world into which Franklin Delano Roosevelt entered on January 30, 1882, in Hyde Park, New York. He was born into one of America's most influential families. His father, James Roosevelt I, was a businessman and landowner, a man who valued discipline and responsibility. His mother, Sarah Ann Delano Roosevelt, came from a wealthy, socially prominent family. Together, they created an environment steeped in wealth, education, and political awareness. The Roosevelt household was structured and nurturing. Franklin had 5 siblings, but his bond with his older brother, James Roosevelt Jr., was especially important. His mother, Sarah, instilled in him the principles of discipline, morality, and intellectual curiosity. Even as a young boy, Franklin observed, absorbed, and reflected, a trait that would define his leadership in the years to come. The family estate in Hyde Park was more than a home. It was a classroom of life. Expansive grounds, servants, tutors, and the trappings of wealth surrounded Franklin. Yet beyond comfort, there were lessons in responsibility and leadership. Political discussions, debates about society, and the rhythms of social etiquette were part of daily life. Franklin learned that leadership was as much about perception as it was about action. Education played a central role. Private tutors nurtured his aptitude for languages, literature, and history. Summers brought travel, exposing him to culture, politics, and a wider world. These experiences cultivated curiosity, adaptability, and awareness, traits essential for the complex life he would lead. But Franklin's early years were not without challenge. He was frail as a child and occasionally fell ill, requiring attention and care. These experiences taught him resilience and patience, and perhaps most importantly, empathy, an ability to understand vulnerability that would later define his public persona. At the age of adolescence, Franklin attended Groton School, an elite preparatory school in Massachusetts. Here he honed his academic skills, developed social poise, and participated in athletics. He learned to navigate social hierarchies, lead peers, and express himself confidently, skills that would become critical in public life. From Groton, Franklin went on to Harvard College, majoring in history and political science. He joined student government, debate societies, and intellectual circles, expanding his understanding of governance and diplomacy. At Harvard, he learned not only how to study history, but how to interpret it, argue persuasively, and lead with insight.
Family connections played a crucial role. The Roosevelts were politically active, and Franklin had access to prominent figures who influenced his early worldview. Exposure to politics, law, and diplomacy within his own household gave him a unique insight into the workings of power. He learned that leadership required intelligence, empathy, and the ability to connect with people from all walks of life. Despite all the privileges, Franklin understood responsibility. Wealth and status came with expectations, and the young Roosevelt internalized the lesson that leadership demanded not only skill, but character. The combination of discipline, resilience, and empathy would become the foundation upon which his future political career was built. By the end of his early education, Franklin D. Roosevelt had become a young man of intelligence, curiosity, and awareness. He had the tools to navigate social hierarchies, the insight to understand human nature, and the confidence to pursue public service. The foundations of empathy, resilience, and leadership were already firmly in place. From the quiet halls of Hyde Park to the intellectual rigor of Groton and Harvard, Franklin cultivated the skills and character that would carry him through the most challenging moments of his life. Every lesson, every relationship, every challenge prepared him for a destiny that would one day place him at the helm of a nation in crisis. The young boy from Hyde Park was ready to step onto a larger stage. a stage where intellect, courage, and vision would be tested in ways he could never have imagined. And it all began here, in the warmth and discipline of a family that expected greatness.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt stepped into adulthood carrying more than privilege. He carried ambition, and he carried expectation. After graduating from Harvard, Franklin continued his education at Columbia Law School. Law, however, never truly captured his passion. Politics did. Even before finishing his degree, Franklin was already moving toward public life, drawn by the same pull that had shaped generations of his family. In 1905, Franklin married Eleanor Roosevelt, his distant cousin and the niece of President Theodore Roosevelt. Eleanor was intelligent, principled, and deeply concerned with social justice, very different from Franklin in temperament, yet destined to become one of the most influential partnerships in American history. Their marriage was not simple. Franklin was charismatic and socially confident. Eleanor was reserved but fiercely independent. Together, they would have 6 children, though tragedy struck early when one child died in infancy. Family life brought joy, strain, and responsibility, experiences that quietly shaped Franklin's emotional depth. In 1910, at just 28 years old, Franklin entered politics, winning a seat in the New York State Senate. He aligned himself with progressive reformers and quickly gained attention for his energy and political instinct. He supported labor reforms, challenged powerful party bosses, and showed a willingness to confront entrenched interests. This was the beginning of his public identity. When Woodrow Wilson became president in 1913, Franklin was appointed Assistant Secretary of the Navy, the same position once held by Theodore Roosevelt. The role suited him. He traveled extensively, managed naval expansion, and learned how large institutions function under pressure. Then came the moment that nearly ended everything. In 1921, while vacationing at Campobello Island, Franklin fell suddenly ill. What began as fatigue turned into paralysis. Doctors diagnosed him with polio. Within days, the energetic politician who loved sailing and physical activity could no longer walk.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt was 39 years old, and his political future appeared finished. For months, he was confined to bed. Pain, uncertainty, and humiliation followed. In an era when disability was seen as weakness, many assumed his public life was over. Newspapers stopped writing about him. Political allies quietly moved on. But something changed inside him. Polio did not break Franklin Roosevelt. It rebuilt him. The illness forced patience. It forced humility. It forced empathy. He learned what it meant to struggle, not in theory, but in reality. He worked relentlessly to regain strength, developing iron discipline and emotional control. Though he would never walk unaided again, he refused to retreat from public life. Eleanor became his political eyes and ears, traveling, speaking, and building alliances, while Franklin rebuilt himself behind the scenes. Their partnership transformed. What began as marriage evolved into collaboration. By the late 1920s, Roosevelt returned to politics, changed, sharpened, more focused. In 1928, he was elected governor of New York, just as the nation was sliding toward economic disaster. 1 year later, the Great Depression struck. Banks collapsed, businesses failed, millions lost jobs. As governor, Roosevelt faced crisis head-on. He expanded relief programs, supported public works, and spoke directly to the people. He did not hide behind technical language. He spoke with reassurance, clarity, and confidence. For the first time, Americans heard a leader who acknowledged suffering and promised action. Roosevelt believed government had a responsibility to help people survive. This belief set him apart from many political leaders of the time. His response to the Depression in New York became a testing ground for ideas that would later reshape the nation. By the late 1920s, Americans were desperate for leadership. The economy was shattered. Hope was fading. Franklin Delano Roosevelt stepped forward, not as the privileged boy from Hyde Park,
but as a man forged by illness, loss, and responsibility. When he accepted the Democratic nomination for president, he spoke words that echoed across the nation. "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." Those words were not abstract. They came from a man who had faced fear in silence, who had lost physical freedom, and who had learned that leadership begins with courage. Franklin Roosevelt had survived his greatest personal battle. Now he was preparing to face America's greatest national one.
When Franklin Delano Roosevelt took the oath of office on March 4, 1933, the United States was a nation in crisis. Banks were collapsing, millions were unemployed, confidence in leadership had evaporated. Fear, not foreign enemies, was the immediate threat. Roosevelt understood this instinctively. In his first days as president, he moved quickly, declaring a bank holiday, restoring stability, and addressing the nation directly through what would become known as fireside chats. He spoke not as a distant authority, but as a calm voice in the living room. Slowly, trust returned. But even as Roosevelt focused on rebuilding America at home, a darker storm was forming overseas. Across Europe, Adolf Hitler was rising. Fascism spread through Germany and Italy. In Asia, Japan expanded aggressively. The world was moving toward war, whether America wanted it or not. Roosevelt saw it coming. Throughout the 1930s, the United States remained deeply isolationist. Memories of World War I were still painful, and Americans wanted no part of another global conflict. Roosevelt had to walk a careful line, strengthening the nation without provoking panic or political backlash. As president, he modernized the military, expanded naval power, and quietly prepared the country for a conflict he believed was inevitable. He also worked diplomatically, forming relationships with Winston Churchill of Britain and later Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union. Still, Roosevelt knew that public opinion, not strategy, would determine America's entry into war. That moment came on December 7, 1941. Japanese forces attacked Pearl Harbor, killing over 2,000 Americans and crippling the U.S. Pacific Fleet. The next day, Roosevelt stood before Congress and delivered words that would echo through history. A date which will live in infamy. War was no longer a distant threat. It was now America's reality. The United States entered World War II, and Franklin Roosevelt became not just a president, but a wartime commander-in-chief. Roosevelt's leadership during the war was defined by communication, coordination, and resolve. He worked closely with military leaders, managed vast industrial expansion, and oversaw the mobilization of millions of Americans. Factories transformed. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers. The nation became an engine of war production. Through it all, Roosevelt continued to speak directly to the people, calming fears, explaining sacrifices, and reinforcing purpose. He also played a critical role on the global stage. Roosevelt helped shape the Allied strategy, coordinating efforts between the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union. He attended pivotal conferences, including Tehran and Yalta, negotiating not only how the war would be fought, but how the world would look after it ended. Behind the scenes, however, the cost was immense. Roosevelt's health was deteriorating. Years of stress, travel, and responsibility weighed heavily on him. He suffered from heart disease and extreme fatigue, yet continued working, often concealing the severity of his condition from the public. In 1944, as the war raged on, Americans elected Franklin Roosevelt to an unprecedented fourth term. They trusted him. They needed him. But the man leading the free world was running out of strength. As Allied forces pushed toward victory in Europe, Roosevelt focused on one final mission: building a framework for lasting peace.
He envisioned a world where international cooperation could prevent future global conflict, a vision that would later become the United Nations. Victory was close. Germany was collapsing, Japan was weakening. The end of the war was in sight. But Franklin Delano Roosevelt would not live to see it.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.